Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. My name is Becky Robinson. I guess it's good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Good morning if you're on the West Coast. And I'm here today with Bonnie Marcus. Bonnie, where are you calling in from today?
East Coast, Connecticut.
East Coast, so we're both on Eastern Time. We are so excited for this event today. Look out before you lean in. And before we get started, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items with our guests. We will be having some polls and also some questions throughout this event. I'd like to invite you right now to try out that question panel by letting us know where you are. I always end up talking about the weather on these events, and both Bonnie and I were lamenting the fact that we are in cloudy, rainy, chilly places today. If you are somewhere nicer, or if you want to tell us about the weather, it looks like we have some callers today from the East Coast, some from Boston and Washington, D.C., from Omaha. Cloudy in Iowa, and so for all of you, whether the weather is nice or not, we are really glad that you've chosen to spend this hour learning with us. The second thing I'd like to let you know is that we would love and invite you to live tweet during this event if you like to tweet, and Bonnie's Twitter handle @selfpromote, and also our hashtag for this event, Politics of Promotion, are at the end of your at the bottom of your screen. So definitely, if you want to participate live with us, we would appreciate that buzz for this event. The third thing that I'd like to let you know is that we are going to have a special giveaway at the end of this event. So we encourage you to stay on until the very end, and we'll let you know at the end of the event what that giveaway is. For those of you who don't know, Bonnie has recently released her first book, The Politics of Promotion, and the content that we're going to share today is drawn from that book. A few more things about Bonnie. Bonnie is an award-winning entrepreneur and a Forbes and Business Insider contributing writer. Bonnie has real conversations for real women in the workplace today. She's the president of Women's Success Coaching, and in that role, she assists women to navigate the workplace and advance their careers. Bonnie has more than 20 years of sales and management experience, including serving as a CEO and a VP of sales at 3 national companies. And she's held executive roles in both startup and Fortune 500 companies. So she is uniquely positioned to bring some real insight into real workplace challenges today. Bonnie, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for logging on again. I apologize for our mishap. What was it, last week, Becky?
Maybe 2 weeks ago.
I was just telling Becky before we logged on here that, I do hundreds of these, and I've never had that happen before. So thank you for hanging in there with us, and we'll get started now.
Great. I'm going to shut off my camera during the presentation, Bonnie, if you want to choose to do the same, and we'll be back on with you at the end for questions.
Okay. Yes, I find it very distracting to look at myself and also follow the slides. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Look Out Before You Lean In, how to successfully navigate the realities of the workplace. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. And if you haven't read it, it's hard to miss what, the conversation about leaning in and what that all means. Basically, it's for women to embrace their ambition and speak up in the workplace, ask for what you want and need, and assert yourself. But my question is, for all ambitious women, is what happens when you do lean in? How can you lean in with savvy? So in other words, how receptive is your workplace to you leaning in? How receptive is it to an assertive, ambitious woman? And that's really what we're going to discuss today, and that's really what I talk about in my book, The Politics of Promotion. How can you be politically savvy so that you can position yourself for success? I think the term the glass ceiling was first talked about in the 1980s, but people argue whether or not it exists now. I know that it's not necessarily a logical step up to a leadership position that a corporate ladder type of image indicates. And when you hit a glass ceiling at the top or not is certainly debatable. But I'd like you to consider that the path to a leadership position nowadays is more like a glass grid, like you see here on the screen. There are certain twists and turns that your career will take. Sometimes you need to take a step back. Sometimes you need to take a lateral move before you can move forward. But what's really important about the glass grid is that there may be obstacles that you will face in your career that are hidden, that you don't really know until you bump into them. And it really takes political savvy to help you understand the best way to circumvent those barriers, perhaps even avoid them. And that's where looking out before you lean in, that's where political savvy comes in. We know that office politics is really important for both genders. But women face special challenges in the workplace. Businesses were first created post-industrial revolution by men, and many of the workplace practices that support men still exist. Women face special challenges around gender stereotypes and some unconscious bias. So the obstacles that women face have really gone underground to some degree. There isn't overt discrimination necessarily in this country anyway, but it can be very subtle, and you don't really understand what it is until you bump into it, and sometimes maybe not even after you bump into it. You know, what did he mean by that, or what did she mean by that? So it makes it much more challenging to navigate when these types of obstacles are hidden. And I say it takes political savvy, and political skill is this interpersonal style that gives you the information, the social astuteness to change your behavior depending on what that situation might be or who you might be in conversation with. You need political savvy to position yourself given the reality of your workplace. And then that allows you to engage with confidence and trust and genuineness because you really do understand what some of those obstacles are, and you understand what the reality is. So the approach in my book, The Politics of Promotion, is to give you a roadmap for how to navigate the reality of your workplace with political savvy so that you get the promotion that you deserve. And there are 5 tools in what I call the political toolkit that we'll go into a little bit today. But the starting point is really to understand that politics is important and that it exists everywhere. Once you accept the fact that you can't escape politics, and they may be different depending on the company you're in, depending on the boss you have, depending on the department you're in. The politics can be ever-changing. That you can then use these tools to help you become more politically savvy. So the first polling question I have for you is, why do you think women tend to discount the role of political skill for their career success? And out of these, which are the ones that you feel apply? So there's more than one correct answer here. Number 1, women feel they don't have the time. They think politics is a waste of time. They focus on their performance, or they have confidence in their ability to build relationships, and so they discount the politics. So Becky, can you run the poll? Okay, I guess I don't see the poll when it's running.
But it is running, and I want to invite
okay.
everyone. People are beginning to vote, Bonnie, and I will show the results in a few minutes. Thanks to those of you who are giving your opinions. The first answer is they don't have time. They think politics is a waste of time. They focus on their performance, or they have the confidence in their ability to build relationships. And remember, you can vote for more than one. I'm just going to give a few more seconds here, Bonnie, before I close the poll and show the results.
Okay.
We have about 65% participation. That's a pretty good number.
Great.
Last chance, and I'm going to close the poll. Wow, we have even more people participating. All right, so I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share the results. Bonnie, what we have is 37% of our respondents said that they don't have time. 49% said they think politics is a waste of time. 78% said they focus on their performance, and 45% said that they have confidence in their ability to build relationships.
Okay, so when I was doing research for my book, I have found that 3 of these answers happen to be what I have heard from women in the workplace, as well as the research that I've done around women and office politics. Women do say they don't have the time for it. You know, they don't make the time for it also because they think it's a waste of time. So A and B, women discount political skill and their career success for those reasons. They focus on their performance, which I'll talk about in a minute. Yes, that's true as well. But the one that perhaps is the least true here is that they already have confidence in their ability to build relationships. So they don't get involved in the politics because they have that confidence that they're using their relationships in the right way. According to the Center for Work-Life Policy, 77% of women believe that their talent and performance is enough for them to get ahead. 77%. So women tend to avoid politics with the idea that they feel that they are taking the high road. And unfortunately, when they avoid the politics, they don't understand what is going on in the workplace that will affect their career advancement. And politics is everywhere. So even as I said before, if you change departments, if you move to a new company, you know, I remember talking to some clients and some people that I interviewed for the book, and they say they really don't like the politics in their company, so they're going to move. Well, you know, in a way, I think that's naive because they're just going to go to another organization where there are perhaps different politics, but you can't avoid the politics. Anywhere you have 2 people, there's going to be politics. And it takes both the political skill to navigate, but also the will to understand that you can't avoid the politics if you are ambitious and you want to move forward. That you really need to understand that politics is everywhere and that it's important that you embrace it, learn about it if you want to get ahead. The first tool in my political toolkit is the mirror, and the mirror helps you to identify your value proposition, which helps you promote yourself. I find that with women especially, we don't take the time to self-reflect and to understand what our value proposition is. And by value proposition, I mean the unique way your work contributes to positive business outcomes. Once you understand what your contribution is, what value you bring to the table, then you can let others know how you can bring value to the business. And that is the most effective way to promote yourself across the organization. I know that women hesitate to talk a lot about their accomplishments. We bring a lot of baggage around, you know, self-promotion and feeling that we should be recognized based on our merit, that we don't want to be considered to be bragging, any of that. So when you position yourself to help others And by the value that you're bringing to the organization, it allows you to talk about your accomplishments that in a way that is not so self-serving. The importance of self-promotion is obvious. I mean, we can learn a lot from our male counterparts who are much better at talking about their accomplishments. This was a study done by Catalyst in 2011, The Myth of the Ideal Worker, and they studied 3,000 women over the course of like 4 years and found that when women were more proactive in making their achievements known, they did advance faster and they had higher salaries. So the issue is really, how do you do this authentically, number one, and how do you do it with some savvy so that it resonates with the right people, with the people that you are trying to build influence with, that you're trying to build some credibility with. What I outline in my book is that it's basically a three-step process, and that promotion is a very political skill. First, you need to use that mirror to understand your value proposition. Know yourself and what you contribute to the business based on how you approach your work. Then know your audience. So this is where the savvy comes in. What interests them? What motivates them? And then you connect the dots for them. You communicate how you can help them based on your value proposition. One of the best examples of this is in the book from Betsy Myers. Betsy Myers was a senior advisor to both President Clinton and President Obama. And when President Clinton was in his first term, Betsy was executive director of the Women's Bureau for the SBA. She was in D.C. She knew that it was important to President Clinton to have the women's vote. I mean, it got him elected the first time, and when he wants to, if he wanted to run again, he would also need the women's block of voting. So she took it upon herself to go over to the White House every week, and she would talk up small business owners, women in business, women thought leaders, conferences where she thought that the White House should send someone, and people that they should connect to. And she did this every day, obviously. When President Clinton, every week, I'm sorry, when President Clinton was reelected, he understood the value that Betsy brought to the table. And he started the first ever women's office in the White House and appointed Betsy to be executive director. So that shows how over time she was able to build her value. The next tool in the toolkit is the magnifying glass. And the magnifying glass allows you to lean in with confidence because it gives you a great deal of information about what's going on in the workplace. The magnifying glass forces you to look at the workplace with both focus and intention because you can't build your career in a vacuum. You really need to understand what the reality is. And there are three things to look for. First, what are the rules and what are the unwritten rules? Two, the power. Who has power and who has influence? And then the third thing to look at is what type of culture. Let's start off with the rules. So every company has employee handbooks. They have a formal set of rules. And if you don't know what they are, you can look on the website. You can check out the handbook. But very often, well, I know for sure, there are hidden rules. And these rules actually rule. The hidden rules rule. It's the way the company actually functions. So to give you a really simple example, say there's a rule that you work a 40-hour work week, you know, it's 9 to 5. And so you're starting in a new company and you show up at 9 o'clock and you realize everybody else in your department's been there since 7:30 in the morning, right? So the unwritten rule is that you put in the extra time, and the unwritten rule might be that you get there before your boss for whatever reason, and that's important. So if you break that rule, it doesn't mean you're going to be fired, but what's important here is that if you want to get promoted, if you're looking for opportunities to get promoted. It's the perception that counts. And when you break that unwritten rule, if you're unaware of that, it definitely does not help you. I can give you another example from my own career. When I was interviewing for the CEO position at one of the service master companies, I had been through months of interviewing and psychological tests, and finally I was going to the corporate headquarters in Chicago, outside of Chicago, for what I thought was my final interview. Got up that morning and I said, I am going to close the deal today. I'm going to put on my power red suit, okay? Walked into corporate headquarters, went up to HR. I was sitting there waiting for my interview, and one of the assistants in that office came up to me really kind of sheepishly, and she whispered, she said, we don't wear red here. I was like, huh? She goes, no, we don't wear red here, meaning women don't wear red here. It was an unwritten rule that I never would, and I still don't know why. Believe me, I don't know why that was true. And I got the job anyway, but the point is I was breaking a rule that I didn't know. So what are the rules? Well, the rules may say that your organization is a meritocracy, right? That people are promoted based on their merit and their performance. But when you look under the covers, who does get promoted and why? And what does it take to get promoted? And really, what is your experience about what it takes for a woman to get ahead? Again, the meritocracy is pretty much a myth. So what is the reality? The reality could be that there are a lot of other dynamics going on that may have a lot to do with the unconscious bias. For instance, leadership could be coded blue. Research shows that when you ask both men and women about who they consider to be a good leader, they're going to tell you more characteristics of a man, of what it's like to be a male leader. In fact, both men and women would choose to have a male boss. Leadership is coded blue. We tend to think of our leaders in both business and outside business as men. Now, is that changing over time? Yes. But this is some of the things that could be the reality in your workplace. Perhaps they're gendered roles. In other words, maybe women are channeled in more support roles, and men get the more visible roles. They get the roles with P&L responsibility, etc. So is it just based on merit? And if not, then really what is the reality? What does it take to get ahead? Some other rules. Well, equal opportunity. Most companies say this, that they will promote people regardless, and hire, I should say, regardless of gender, race, religion, age, sexual orientation. But what is the reality? So look at the senior leadership. Who are the senior leaders? Is there an equal representation by gender? Do men actually get promoted faster? Are women in support roles only? And you'll see that maybe women don't have that P&L responsibility. Again, you need to look closely. And does the company really invest in women's leadership? Sometimes they will pay lip service to it. So what's happening? Does everyone have equal access to resources? Some people can just get around the channels of command. They've figured out how to maneuver and get what they want. Everybody isn't really doing a fair share and getting equal access. Behind the scenes, some people are perhaps doing what's called invisible work. Women fall into this trap a lot. They're doing a lot of work that doesn't necessarily benefit their career. And women tend to be asked to do these types of things, even, get coffee at the meeting, figure out who's going to be the caterer for the meeting. This kind of behind-the-scenes work is usually given to a woman. I when I was working for a technology startup. I was one of 3 principals, and we were looking for venture capital. We went to all the large venture capital firms in the U.S. and Canada, and I was one of 3 principals in this firm. I was the only woman, and of course venture capital was all male as well. But I'll never forget, one day we walked into a conference room, this venture capital firm in New York, and one of the principals of that firm came up to me and asked me if I'd go out and get coffee for everyone. And I looked around. Of course, I was the only woman there. And people say, what did you do? What did you do? Well, I put out my hand and I said, let me introduce myself. I'm Bonnie Marcus, and I told him what I did for the company, and I didn't have to get the coffee. But very often, this is a gendered type of role as well. The next thing to look for is the power. And actually, Becky and I have chuckled over this photo. I've used this at several of my presentations at conferences, and what's really interesting is that different people have different ideas about who really has the power here. Is it the man who's working for the woman, who is in that Amy Cuddy kind of, power pose, or the opposite? And the fact of the matter is, what may seem obvious to you in the workplace about who has power may not be the case. In other words, there may not be a direct correlation between who has power and influence and the hierarchy, the organizational chart. I've have an instance in my book. I've interviewed a woman who was brought in by the CEO of a company to start some changes. He had this brand new initiative, and he brought her in, and she was all gung-ho about it, and it turned out that she was really stepping on the senior VP of HR's toes in this new role. The CEO, who brought her in to make changes, and obviously was, she thought, going to be supportive, gave his power over to the HR person. He didn't back her in this new role, in this initiative, and so she had no chance of being successful here. But it's a chance. This is an opportunity to see, wow, he's the CEO of the company, but he has given up his power to somebody else in this instant, and that's not unusual. Look at the way decisions are made. How are decisions actually made in your company? And are there people who are in favor? Because people who are in favor usually have a lot of power. Who initiates change, and how does it happen? Does it happen from the bottom up, or does it happen from the top down? One template that I offer in my book is that, you can use this when you're trying to track how a decision is made. Look at who the decision maker is, and then focus your attention on the people that influence that person. Because when you're building your network, you want to include all these people. So the decision maker might be a hiring manager, but that person turns to other people when he or she is finally making a decision. And those influencers need to know about your value proposition as well. All of these people need. And if you leave anybody out, then that can impact the way the decision is made. Next thing to look at is the culture. So what is the culture in your organization? Is it consensus driven? Is it conservative? Innovative? Is it toxic? And how does the culture adapt to change? Does it pay lip service to diversity? What type of behavior is rewarded? In other words, if you are an assertive woman, is that rewarded, or is it frowned upon? Is it rewarded with some people in some departments but not others? So it's very, very important to gather all this information so you know the best way to position yourself. And then you put this all together and you say, well, what have I learned about what it takes to get ahead where I am? What is the reality? The next tool in the toolkit is the Pass, Go, Collect $200 card. And many of you, I'm sure, remember this from Monopoly. And when you landed on this, place on the board and you got this card, you collected more money, and it allowed you to advance around the board faster. Well, the same thing is true of strategic networking. When you network in a very strategic way, there's a direct correlation between your networking activity and increased salary, faster promotions. Unfortunately, a lot of us network like throwing spaghetti against the wall. We gather a lot of contacts, we give out or we collect business cards, and there isn't really any kind of focus to it. So a strategic network is a powerful collection of people who are willing and able to speak for you. And it all starts with your career goal. So we're going to go into the next polling question now. And I'd like to know, which of the following statements do you feel is not true about how men and women network? Women network with people they know and like. Men and women spend equal time networking. Men are more strategic than women about building a network. And men network to obtain something. Women network for relationships. Is there one statement there that you feel is not true? Becky, can you open the poll?
I have opened the poll, Bonnie, and so we'd like you to select one on this poll about which of these is not true. Thanks so much for your fast responses. So, Bonnie, while we're waiting for those responses, I have a question for you that I've been dying to ask. What did you do when you were at that interview with the red coat and you were told that women don't wear red there? Did you take it off? Did you hide? Like, what did you do?
I couldn't take it off. It was my suit.
Oh.
Wasn't a coat. It was my suit. So I think it would have been, that would have been an obvious rule to break if I took off my clothes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think I'd recommend that for job interviews.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to give everybody like one more chance to participate. We've got a high rate of participation on this one.
Great.
Yes, so I'm going to close the poll and I will share those results. So, which of the following statements is not true about how women and men network? Overwhelmingly, Bonnie, 84% of the respondents to this poll said that the one that's not true is that men and women spend equal time networking. 84% of people think that's not true. 12% of people said that men are more strategic, and 4% said that men network to obtain something and women for relationships. So thanks for participating.
And those are true. What is not true is that men and women spend equal time networking. They don't. And the other thing is that men are much more strategic about the way they network. So the last one, D, is definitely true.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So what are some of the benefits of a strategic network? Well, it does result in increased income, and I'll show you a study that was done to show that there's a direct correlation. It helps promote you and refers you for new opportunities. I know this from my own experience, but also when I interviewed people for the book, when they were looking for a new opportunity, whether it was within their own company or outside their company, you know, trying to make a move to a totally different organization, they would turn to their network, and their network would provide information or leads. There's one woman that I talk about in the book who's a former client of mine who definitely had a strategic network. I mean, she nurtured it. She did many, many things for her network to build that relationship, those relationships over time. And she was, I'd say, in her mid-40s. She was the main breadwinner in her family, and her husband stayed home and took care of the kids, so her income was important. She left financial services and took a risk with a startup technology company to be their COO, and after a year and a half, they let her go. And there she was without any kind of job and not a lot of lead time to find a new one. And she immediately turned to her network, And people came forward so fast with other opportunities back in financial services. She eventually landed a job that hadn't even been posted yet. And she did that. She had another position at a high level, senior leadership position, in 60 days. And that's because of her network. The other thing that a network does is it offers critical information about the workplace, about people, about politics. So as you're trying to put your network together and you want to make connections with people that maybe you don't know that well, you can turn to some of your contacts and say, can you introduce me to Becky? Or maybe you can tell me some more information about her before I have my meeting. The other way I've seen this used is when somebody was that I interviewed for the book took a position, moved from New York to Boston. Her network gave her a lot of information about the culture of her new company up in Boston, the personalities and what to expect. So a network is there to support you. A strategic network is there to support you. This is the study I was talking about. It was done by Upwardly Mobile with Pepperdine University, and they showed that there was a direct correlation between networking in a very strategic way and higher salaries and career advancement. So your network is your net worth. How do you create a strategic network? The first place to start is what you are trying to achieve. What's your career goal? And you build a support network around what that goal is. You need to understand your influence and establish your competence and credibility with key stakeholders. So that starts with the mirror, right? Understanding your value proposition, and then identifying who are the key stakeholders to establish those relationships. Establish mutually beneficial relationships, just like I highlighted with the Betsy Myers example. It's what can each party do for one another. Those are the strongest kind of relationships. Build allies and bridges across the organization and identify key stakeholders and sponsors. So that's how you build. It starts with your career goal. And many people don't do that. They just network. Okay, so where do you start when you're looking in your workplace? How do you start to build this? Well, I've divided the workplace into 3 basic categories. Operational contacts are those who help you get your job done every day. They may not be in your department, they may be in marketing or IT, and you're in operations, but those are people that you interact with regularly, and they help you get your job done. The developmental contacts are key stakeholders, potential sponsors, mentors. They're people who you may know and you may need to build stronger relationships with, and also who you need to know to reach that career goal. And the last category are strategic contacts. And these people can be sources of information. They can serve as the connectors that I just gave an example of, like with Becky. You're meeting with somebody or you want to meet a potential sponsor or mentor, and you reach to your network and say, can you provide that introduction? Strategic people can also help you do your job better. So if you have a project that's stuck in IT, perhaps you can reach to a strategic contact and say, you know, I'm trying to get this project done, I've got this deadline, and I can't seem to move this through IT, and your contact will say, let me pick up the phone and call Fred, and before you know it, your project's through. So of course all of these overlap, and each person can function in more than one role. But this helps you to begin to categorize and look at the different ways you can build the strategic network. What are some of the things that really hold us back? Well, we tend to limit our network with people that we know and like, and that really limits our visibility. We tend not to go out of that comfort zone, and this is very, very common with women. We don't build this network to support our career advancement. As I said before, it's just like, oh, we know we should network, we're going to go to this event, we're going to go to that event, but it's really throwing spaghetti against the wall. These aren't people that you need to help you advance your career, that need to know the value that you bring to the business. We don't network proactively. So I don't know how many times I have this discussion with my clients who are considering maybe moving to another job in another department or whatever, and they don't have the network there to support them yet. You know, they're kind of backpedaling because they haven't built these relationships, they haven't nurtured these relationships, and now they're going to need them. We don't delegate and set time aside to network. So a lot of pushback, I get a lot of pushback from women that say, don't have time to network. You know, the guys go out after work and maybe they go play golf, or they seem to have a lot more time, but I can't do that. I've got to go home, I've got a family, I've got kids, I've got my second job. And so what I will challenge these women with is that you need to network. It's important to network. You don't have to go to the golf outing necessarily. If you can, that's great. You don't have to go for drinks afterward. But once you have identified the people that you need in your network who can help you reach your career goal, you set up meetings with them one-on-one, and maybe it's coffee or maybe it's lunch. But put it on your calendar. Actually schedule it. Put a block of time once a week for a lunch meeting, and then, you know, fill in an appointment with somebody. You can do this. You do have time to do this, and it's a matter of focus and intention. The other thing that women tend to do is, or don't do, is leverage relationships. So this has everything to do with the quid pro quo. So we're very anxious to help other people, and we will do lots of favors, but then we don't ask for anything in return. You know, I'll say to workshop groups that I'm presenting to, okay, so if somebody asks you for an introduction to someone that they want to meet, don't you think it's okay if you turned around and asked them to introduce you to somebody? And most often people will say yes. But we don't even think of doing this. Somebody referred to this once as airline miles. That as women, we tend to build up all these airline miles with favors that we do for everyone. We've got hundreds of thousands of miles, and then they expire before we can cash them in. So as you're thinking about leveraging relationships, think about that. I love that whole idea with the airline miles because it's very true. We do build up favors. You know, it's referred to often as like a favor bank when we offer to do things for other people. And at some point when we need something and we have built these important relationships, it's okay to ask for something in return that we need. And it may be just an introduction. It may be just information. It may be leads about a new job, or who are the people who are influencing decisions. It may be you know, information about the workplace. But don't be afraid to ask. I love this study and this slide because it shows very clearly the difference between what is an open network and a closed network. On the right, network B is a highly closed network, and women and people of color most often have this type of network. This is a network where everybody knows everybody. And it's when you network with people that you know and like, you tend to build this type of a network. The network on the left, network A, which is highly open, is actually associated with faster promotions and higher bonuses. These people don't know each other. The only person they know in common is you. But it allows you to have much, much wider exposure because now you're not only visible to the people you connect with, but you have access to their entire network. And I'd like to think of this as a LinkedIn model, right? When somebody connects with you on LinkedIn, you now can connect to their connections. And so if everybody knew everybody and you all had those people in common, you can see how that limits your visibility and exposure. So it's the more open network, which really necessitates us getting out of our comfort zone to put together a network of diverse individuals, not just people that we already know and we already like. I love this quote because it just highlights that women need to leverage relationships, and it is a leadership skill. We tend to look down on it. We don't think that it is a necessity, but it is viewed as a leadership skill, and it's one that's very important for you to do within your network. The next tool is the get out of jail free card. And why did I use that Monopoly card for sponsorship? Because sponsorship is so powerful. Will it get you out of jail? Yes. Will it keep you from being in jail? Yes. A sponsor will propel your career forward and protect you from any kind of negative politics. The sponsor literally pulls you up through the organization and promotes you, gives you high visible assignments. It allows you to take a risk. And sponsors are senior leaders, so they need to have the power to be able to do this within the organization. And the other thing is they need to know your value proposition. So these relationships don't happen overnight. It takes a while to nurture these relationships, but as you're building your strategic network, in the beginning, identify people who potentially could be sponsors. And so over time, you would be able to build that trust with them. Okay, our last polling question is, which of the following is the most cited reason for women selecting the wrong sponsor? And the first one is, well, they don't have the high-level relationships. Women are more likely to search for a sponsor whose leadership style they admire rather than someone with power. Women lack role models. Women are more comfortable working with other women. So what do you think is the most cited reason why women don't have the right career sponsor? Becky, can you...
Yes, I have launched that poll, and so we're looking for your response to this question, and thanks in advance for those of you who are already participating. Bonnie, did you have strong career sponsors in your career?
You know what, Becky? I did not. I had mentors. I didn't even know about the sponsor relationship, to be honest with you, and I talk about that in the book. If I knew it was available, I would definitely seek out a sponsor. So I didn't. And what I talk about in the chapter on sponsorship in my book is, okay, you know that this type of relationship is available. It can be either a formal sponsorship program at your company or the opportunity for you to independently choose a sponsor. But either way, it's a powerful relationship that is available to you, and you need to seek out the right kind of person to be your sponsor and nurture that relationship.
That's very helpful, and I found that chapter to be one of the most helpful in the book. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. We had a high percentage of people participating.
Great.
And I'm going to share those results with the group. 57% of you said that women prioritize sponsors' leadership styles over their power. 23% said that women don't have high-level relationships, and 10% each said that women lack role models or that women are more comfortable working with other women.
Great, great. All of these are true to some degree, but the most cited reason for women selecting the wrong career sponsor is that they tend to choose sponsors who don't have power, potentially role models or people whose leadership style they admire. not necessarily somebody who has the clout to really pull them up through the organization and make a clear path for them to get to the top. So this is really important to know as you're beginning to look for sponsors. You may find that, well, you don't really like this person's management style. Again, this person isn't providing mentorship, and they're not necessarily a role model, but they will be there for you. And when people know that you have a sponsor, they immediately show you tremendous respect. There's some stories in the book in this chapter where women said that their sponsor would come over to them and just shake their hand or say hello in the cafeteria or before a meeting. And of course everybody turned around and said, wow, the CEO just came over to Bonnie, and so you immediately get respect just out of that relationship. But it takes somebody who has that respect and has that power to be able to make things happen for you. And this is a study done by Sylvia Ann Hewlett, and I apologize because I spelled her name wrong here and I just realized it. Okay, it's Hewlett. So she did, she's done a lot of work on sponsors, and this one shows the gender difference actually, but also the rate of advancement and forward momentum that you get with a sponsor versus not having a sponsor. The other thing that's important to note here is that 48% of women executives credit their personal connections for the promotion. 83% of men do. So that's very telling, right?
Indeed.
Indeed. Oh, I got it. Somebody answered. Okay. And the last tool in the toolkit is coaching. Why do you need a coach when you have all these other tools? Well, a coach can help you to use the tools in the toolkit. The mirror, the magnifying glass, the get out of jail free card, the Pasco collect $200 card. All of these tools a coach can help you use to the maximum and with a lot of savvy. So a coach, a really good coach, will help you to objectively look at the workplace, because sometimes, and I know this from my own experience as well as working with some of my clients, we can be really emotional about what's going on in the workplace, especially when we feel that the politics are working against us. One way a coach can help you is to give you an objective point of view and give you some advice on how best to navigate what that reality is, whatever it is, so that you can position yourself for success. So a coach helps you use all of the tools in the toolkit so that you can reach your full potential. So look out before you lean in. What do you need to do? Well, you need to understand the workplace dynamics. You need to observe. Well, not only observe, but listen. Pay attention to the culture, the rules, and the power. You need to build a strategic network. People who can or are willing and able to speak for you. Build allies and champions with key stakeholders. And know how to promote yourself in a savvy way by offering to help others because of the value that you bring. Aligning yourself with what their goals are, what their objectives are. And in doing so, you can create visibility and credibility for yourself across the organization as somebody who can really get things done, who really contributes to the business. And so it's promoting yourself in a way that is more of a leadership skill than self-serving.
Super. So we have a few minutes, Bonnie, that we can address a few questions that have been coming in. And I would encourage you,
Great.
if you have some questions, even if we're not going to have a chance to get to them because we only have a few moments, what I'd love for you to do is share them, and perhaps Bonnie could cover those in a future newsletter or blog post. And I will share a few questions with you now, Bonnie. Denise was asking about how you can manage politics and all of these ideas in a virtual environment. She does not work at the corporate location of the company, and so she's wondering how she can navigate the workplace as a virtual team member.
Oh, that's a great question, and I get that question a lot. How do you navigate virtually? Well, you can find out a lot by asking questions, certainly, and building relationships with some key people who can give you information about the workplace. But when you're on conference calls or video chats with your team, or and it could even be a global team, make sure that you take notes and as to who said what during that meeting. And after the call is over, email people and say, wow, you brought up that point in the meeting. I think that was really insightful. And what do you think about this? In other words, you're building relationships remotely, virtually, by continuing the conversation. Think of ways where you might be able to offer them help with a certain project. So you're doing the same kinds of things, but you're not limiting it to the conversation that happens in a formal meeting. And the best way to do that is really pay attention to who's saying what, and afterwards either send them a note to compliment them or continue the discussion in some way so that they begin to know you outside of that, just that phone conversation.
That is very helpful. Bonnie, one more question before we need to wrap the hour. This one comes from Elizabeth, and she's wondering what types of statements are best to use in self-promotion. And she's wondering if you can provide some examples of how to begin the statement and end it if you're wanting to say something to promote the value that you're bringing to your organization.
Okay, well, I can give you an example of one of my clients who was in a very siloed organization, and we decided her value proposition was she had an MBA in business experience, and she also had a technical background, and she wanted to get promoted. She wanted to increase her visibility across the organization, different departments. And so she knew that her value was that she could find technology solutions to business problems. And she started to build her strategic network, and she would meet with the people, and at first she would ask questions. So I would never go in and say, this is Bonnie, and I can find the technology solution, and I'm a techie, I'm terrific, and blah, blah. I'd never suggest that. But what you can do is ask questions and find out what it is that they want and need. In this case, Katie said, I work over here in this department, and I'm not really sure what you do here. Tell me a little bit about what you do, what your work is. And they would begin to tell her, and she said, do you have any projects that have failed or have imploded in some way that you find challenging? Because I can probably help you find a technology solution for that. So she's offering to help based on the value she knows she can bring. And it's not an elevator pitch. It's finding out what is important to other people and then aligning what you can offer, connecting the dots for them.
That's very helpful. And Bonnie, because we've had so many questions come in, I will definitely want folks to check your website, Women's Success Coaching, and find out ways to connect with you so that perhaps...
Well, my email's right here.
Yes, indeed. So what we want to do before we wrap the hour is I mentioned a special giveaway. Bonnie has 5 copies of her book that she's going to give away to the first 5 people, and this time we're switching it up. We want you to email Bonnie the feedback from this event, and she'll be back in touch with you quickly if you're one of those winners. listeners. For everyone else, I encourage you to go to Amazon today to buy Bonnie's book. It will be a tremendous resource to you in your career. It's on Kindle and in print. And you can stay tuned. I will be sharing a recording and some additional follow-up with you via email. Bonnie, thank you so much for sharing this hour. It's been jam-packed full of tremendous content, and I'm sure that those who are listening are feeling the same way.
Thank you, Becky, for hosting.
Have a great day, everyone.